Hello, I'm Simon from Ultimate Floor Care. Today we're going to be covering the Cobra belt sander tension roller. That's one of these things. Now this is very important because this works at the business end of the sander. So if this isn't right, the machine isn't going to do what it says on the tin. It'll take you longer, it'll produce sub-quality results, and you'll wish you'd paid more attention to it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what I do to check the condition of the tension roller. Now the condition can be wear, because the machine wears it, or it can be a condition of how it's been reassembled in the machine. If someone else has had a go at the machine, it's very easy to have reassembled it incorrectly and then it won't work properly. So although this is part of another video that we've done on how to check your tension roller tension assembly, one of the first things that it's good to do when you take the tension roller out is to check its orientation, and by that I mean, as this part emerges from inside the chassis, you may notice that one side of this shaft has a little chamfer on it and the other side doesn't. Now there's an eye bolt that goes through this hole, and that's the only thing that forces it to be either one way up or the other way up. Now it should be the way up where this chamfer is uppermost. If it's not, it means someone has disassembled this machine before, they've put it back in correctly, the upside down, the wrong way up, and it's not going to work properly. So that's the first telltale sign that the machine has been tampered with by someone who either didn't know what they were doing or careless or not looking what they're doing. Now the second thing I have seen in the past on very odd occasions is this slip ring. If I can get it out. This slip ring comes off the shaft first, but of course it could go on either way round. It doesn't go on this way round. If you find it coming off the machine this way round, again, someone has taken it apart not knowing what they were doing and they put it on back to front. So it should be that way round. Now the second thing you need to do is to check the diameter of the main tension roller collar. This is the bit that wears out fastest. Now the specification for this, when they're new in the factory, and I've got a new one here, is 59.7 millimeters in diameter. You'd be a bit of a nerd for remembering that. I know, because I do them all the time. These figures are freely available on the internet. If you Google it, Pellman Cobra tension roller diameter, you'll come up with a PDF that tells you. Or if you ring me, I can tell you. So the first thing I do is to check the diameter. Now this says 57.5 at that end, and I'll do one in the middle, 56.74, and at this end, oh look at that, 53.65. Now the wear tolerance for this collar is in two parts. Firstly, at no point along its length must it be less than 56 millimeters, but in addition to that, no one part of the collar diameter should be more than 1 millimeter different from any other part. Now clearly at this end it was a little over 53 millimeters, so it fails on the overall minimum diameter, and it also fails because 53 is more than 1 millimeter less than it was down here, 57 or thereabouts. So This collar needs to be changed, and that's what I'm going to be showing you how to do. Also, while we're at it, you can check the profile of these ramp pieces here. Now, if the belt on a Cobra is well adjusted and it sits in the middle of the middle core and it doesn't drift off to one side trying to come out the machine, or drift onto the inside trying to chew its way through the machine, these actually do little if anything. They're really only there to contain the belt if it's drifting a little further than the adjustment can hold it. So it starts to ride up these rising ramps here. Now this is a good indicator. If these are like new ones, which are perfectly uniform there, it means the belt has never run out of true. It's always been adjusted properly and these have never done anything. But if these ramps are very notched or ridged, let me see if I've got a, here's a better one. Can you see that ridge there? That means the belt on this particular machine has been riding and resting on that ridge for a long time, or heavily, which indicates that it wasn't adjusted well. So you've taken your tension roller out to give it a good check. You've discovered that the central roller core is beyond the manufacturer's wear limit. This is where I'll show you what we do to change it. So first of all, having taken off that little ring, which just slides off, and the first outer roller, that should slide off as well. The next thing to do is to remove this end roller, but we'll need to undo that screw first. It can be a little difficult to undo this screw because there are so many bearings in this thing. That will rotate independently of it, so will that bit, and the only bit you've got left to get hold of is that bit, which isn't much to grip hold of. What I would normally do is get a spare 8mm bolt, put it in the end and hold it by hand, then it'll undo. Now, once the two end rollers are off, you can see underneath there are two dust seals. They don't do a great deal because this whole shaft, by design, has to be able to waggle at an angle. The main bearing is in the middle there, and it has to stop it from shifting sideways in that plane, but it has to allow a little bit of angular movement. So given that there is some angular movement there, these seals are never really going to make a good tight dust seal, but they do cover a great deal of it. They'll stop the majority of the dust going in there. And it's fixed, this shaft and this bearing are fixed in with circlips. So in order to get the collar off, we need to take these seals off, and the easiest way to do it is with an old screwdriver. Prise that one out. Prise that one out. Now this is difficult to see. Okay, I'm going to see if I can, yeah, there it is. Can you see that circlip? The two holes in the end there. That's it. And there is one at the other end as well. The reason why we have to take out both seals, you only need to take out one circlip in order to remove the shaft, but that's the circlip holders. It's very difficult to get enough working room next to the shaft unless you pull it sideways like that. Now obviously if the seal at the other end was still fitted, you wouldn't get that much movement on the shaft, so that's why I take both out. So and there's the first circlip. This will allow you now to remove the centre shaft. That's the bearing that won't allow movement in that direction, but will allow a little bit of movement in that direction. These are also fitted with a wavy washer, for the want of a better description. It just takes up the free movement slack end to end, and if you look down there, that's the other circlip. We'll need to take that out as well. Now, to give you a good idea as to how much these wear over the course of time, have a look at the comparison between a new one and an old one. That's the thickness it should be. That's what many of them end up looking like when they've done a year or two of service. It is quite difficult to tell if these bearings are worn because they don't function in the same way that a normal bearing does, because they have this ability to move in that direction. So it's quite a lot more difficult to see if they're not moving in that direction and not moving in that direction. But generally, if the seal looks unbroken on both sides, and if there's no oily liquid oozing out from the seals anywhere, and if they're not clearly rattling, I would tend to take it that they're good and it can go back without being replaced. So the first thing we need to do is to put one of these circlips back in. There are websites that tell you circlip holes are bigger in one side than they are in the other, and that there is a one-way round for a circlip to go. I've studied these as closely as I can and I've never seen it. So we're going to put that back in there like that. That should snap into place. Now these two circuit grooves and the bearing space in the middle are the same distances from both ends, so these are symmetrical around the middle. It doesn't matter which end you go. What does matter is that I like to call it an end float washer. It just takes up the end float slack. This does have a way around, and it's meant to be on that side of this bearing. So if I put this washer in that side, it means the shaft is going to go in that way round. And when it's fully seated, it should be possible, I don't know, you can see this on the camera, to see the other circlip slot. No, I can't see it on the camera, but oh, there it is. Can you see it? Very, very small section of it. So we will then offer in the other circlip. Don't worry if you can't get this to sit all the way initially. It is possible to press it into a place with a screwdriver. Being careful, of course, not to use a sharp implement and manage to damage the seal of the bearing you've just decided is good anyway. After that, of course, then we need to fit new dust seals. Once you've got them part way and all the way around, you can use a soft-headed persuasion tool to finish it off. First one end, then the other. In fact, that one was a good sliding fit and I was able to push it without hitting it. So there are 4 degrees or stages of reconditioning you can do to these rollers. Almost always the one that you need, the reason why it needs to in the first place is because the core sleeve is worn at this end. So that's the first stage. The second one is you might choose to change the bearing in the middle. If you choose not to do that, then you've got the choice of replacing the bearings in the end rollers. Now, as I said earlier, normally these don't do any work. If the belt is properly aligned, these don't do any work, and even if the belt rides slightly with a little bit of pressure on that incline, there's not a great deal of mechanical load on these bearings. The biggest aspect of the load is the speed load. But even then, if the belt hasn't been riding on it, they almost don't turn. So I would tend to assume that unless this is badly worn, then the bearings are not going to be worn either. However, in the case of this one, the bearings feel almost a little too free. There's a little bit of noise there, and if I hold it and spin it, it reaches a sticking point at one position in its rotation. So I'm going to replace these two bearings. And out they come. So, new bearings. And there you have a reconditioned roller ready to provide a very good service again.